My father sold uniforms for a living. He never finished high school. He never set foot in a university. He spent his entire life selling coats and caps to policemen and postmen in New York. And he taught me something that no physicist in the world, not Einstein, not Bohr, not Dirac, ever could. My name is Richard Feynman. In 1965, I received the Nobel Prize for my work in physics. And when a reporter asked me if my work was worthy of such an honor, I said one sentence that nobody understood. I said, "My papa brought me up this way. Stop on that." Nobody understood what I meant. Not the reporter, not the academy, not the physicists who had flown in from 12 countries to watch. But I meant it exactly. And to understand what I meant, you have to go back to a kitchen in New York in 1920, to a high chair, to a box of broken bathroom tiles, and to a man who had decided, before I was even born, that his son was going to see the world differently than everyone else. That man had no college degree. Remember that. It matters for everything that follows. His name was Melville. He was born in Minsk in 1890. He came to America at 5. He grew up on Long Island. He wanted to be a scientist. He never became one. His family could not afford college. He tried a few trades. Then he settled into the uniform business and stayed there for the rest of his life. But before I was born, he told my mother something. He said, "If it's a boy, he's going to be a scientist." He did not ask. He decided. You know a person like this. The one who looks at a child before the child even exists and sees what that child is going to become. Most people say things like this and forget them. My father did not forget. He spent the next 20 years making sure it came true. The first thing I remember about him has nothing to do with words. I was very small, still in a high chair. He came home one evening with a box of tiles. Not toys. Bathroom tiles. Seconds. Rejects. Different colors. He set them up on my tray. Vertically. Like dominoes. Pushed one. They all fell. He set them up again. I helped. After a while, we started making patterns. 2 white, 1 blue. 2 white, 1 blue. 2 white, 1 blue. My mother watched from the doorway. She said, "Leave the poor child alone. If he wants to put a blue tile, let him put a blue tile." My father said, "No. I want to show him what patterns are like, how interesting they are. This is a kind of elementary mathematics." Remember what was happening here. I was still in a high chair. I could barely speak, and a uniform salesman with no college degree had decided to begin my education. And he had chosen patterns as the first lesson. He had already decided, before I had any say, that the world was full of patterns, and that I was going to learn to see them. This is the part that stays with me. He was determined that his son would never make the mistake the world would try to make with him. The mistake of confusing a word with a thing. That is the mistake most educated people spend their whole lives making. My father refused to let me begin my life with it. When I was a little older, he used to sit me on his lap and read to me from the Encyclopedia Britannica, not children's books, the adult encyclopedia. And we would read about dinosaurs. The book would say, "This dinosaur is 25 feet high. Its head is 6 feet across." Most fathers would have read that and moved on. My father would stop. He would say, "Now, let's see what that means." That would mean that if he stood in our front yard, he would be tall enough to put his head through our window up here, and he would point up. We were on the 2nd floor, but his head would be too wide to fit through. I was a very small boy. Suddenly, a dinosaur was standing in our front yard. I could see him. I could see the teeth. I could see the window and the head that was too wide to fit. You have had a moment like this as a child. When something you read in a book became real. When the words stopped being words and became a thing you could almost touch. That moment is never an accident. Someone gave it to you. Someone stopped reading and said, "Let's see what that means." Everything he read, he translated. The book gave a number. He gave a picture. The book gave a word. He gave a world. I did not know this was teaching. I thought this was simply how adults read books. You have met a person like my father once in your life, if you were lucky. The one who cannot bear it when someone confuses knowing with understanding. The one for whom a word is not an answer. It is a question. And then, one summer, he gave me the lesson I would carry into every laboratory I ever entered. Hold on to this, because this is the moment that changes everything. My family went to the Catskills on vacation. All of the fathers went there with their sons. During the week, they worked in the city, and on weekends, they came up. One Monday morning, after the fathers had gone back to work, I was playing with the other boys in a field. One of them pointed at a bird. He said, "See that bird? What kind of bird is that?" I said, "I haven't the slightest idea." He said, "It's a brown-throated thrush. Your father doesn't teach you anything." But he had it exactly backwards. My father had already taught me about that bird. He had pointed to one, maybe the same one, and said something I still remember word for word 60 years later. He said, "See that bird? It's a Spencer's warbler." I knew even then that he did not know the real name. He was making it up. I could see it in his eyes. Then he said, "Well, in Italian, it's a chudo lapidida. In Portuguese, a bom de peda. In Chinese, chung ta. In Japanese, katano takeda." He had invented every one of those names. Then he looked at me and he said, "You can know the name of that bird in all the languages of the world, but when you are finished, you will know absolutely nothing whatever about the bird. You will only know about humans, in different places, and what they call the bird. So let's look at the bird and see what it is doing. That is what counts." That was the moment. That was what my father gave me that no physicist in the world could teach. Not a fact, not a formula, a way of seeing. The difference between knowing the name of something and knowing the thing itself. A uniform salesman in New York had given me, before I could read a scientific paper, the first principle of science. Decades later, I became a professor, and I watched other scientists name things and mistake the naming for the knowing. I watched brilliant students memorize words and think they had understood something. Every time I saw my father in the Catskills, pointing at a bird, he gave me one more thing, and this one I kept closest. I was playing in the yard with a little wagon. A ball was inside it. When I pulled the wagon, the ball rolled to the back. When I stopped, it rolled to the front. I ran to my father. I said to him, "Pop, why does the ball do this?" He said that nobody knows. He did not pretend. He did not reach for a word. He did not invent an authority he did not have. He told me the truth. Then he said that the general principle is that things which are moving tend to keep on moving, and things which are standing still tend to stand still unless you push them hard. This is called inertia. But nobody knows why it is true. Think about what he had just done. A child asked a question. Most fathers would have given a word and moved on. My father gave the word and then said, "But nobody knows why." He taught me, before I was old enough to read, that there are names and there are reasons. And we often have the names, but not the reasons. And an honest man knows the difference. You have known a person like this. Someone who, when they did not know, said so, who refused to cover an empty space with a word. They are rarer than you think. He showed me one other thing, a small thing that became a large thing. He would open a magazine. There would be a picture of the Pope, or a general, or a king. All the people in the photograph would be bowing, and my father would say, "Now look at these humans. One is standing. All the others are bowing. What is the difference?" I would look. He would wait. Then he would say, "The difference is epaulettes. The difference is uniform. The difference is position." But this man, the one they are bowing to, he eats dinner like anybody else. He has the same problems as everybody. He is a human being. He had spent his whole life selling those uniforms. He knew exactly what was inside them, which was an ordinary man like any other. Remember this. It matters for what comes next. Which brings me back to Stockholm. In 1965, I had won the Nobel Prize. The ceremony was elaborate. There were gowns, there were bows, there were men in uniforms of their own, and I hated every minute of it. A reporter asked me afterward whether my work was worthy of such an honor. I said words that had been planted in me decades earlier by my father. I said, "I don't believe in honors. Honors is epaulettes. Honors is uniforms. My papa brought me up this way." I could feel him behind the words even then. He had been dead for 19 years. He died in October of 1946. He was 56 years old. He had never seen the Nobel Prize. He had never seen the work I was being honored for. But everything I was being honored for, he had put inside me before I could read. You have lost someone like this. Someone who gave you something you did not understand while they were alive. Someone whose gift only became clear after they were gone. You wake up one morning and see yourself doing something, and you realize that came from them, and they are not here to see it. That is what Stockholm was for me, a hall full of strangers, bowing to work that belonged as much to a uniform salesman in New York as it did to me. There is something I want you to carry out of this. It is not about physics. The people who change the world are rarely changed by schools. They are rarely changed by famous names. They are rarely changed by the buildings they study in. They are rarely changed by institutions. They are changed by change. They are changed by one person, usually at home, usually without a degree, usually without any idea of what they are doing. Someone who stopped on every page and said, "Let's see what that means." My father never won a prize. He never wrote a paper. He never held a university position. When he died, the world did not notice, but he gave me something that no physicist in the world could teach, something that mattered more than titles. A way of looking at a bird, a number, a uniform, a dinosaur in a book, and seeing past the name to what was actually there. My father sold uniforms for a living, and he was the only teacher I ever really had.